Hey, y'all. My name is Mary Vance. I am a high school senior photographer and videographer, educator and business mentor from North Carolina, and you are listening to the Workflows Photography Podcast.
You guys travel a lot for your brand photography, or is it all mostly local?
We have previously. We traveled a whole lot. I'll be honest with you. Ever since we moved to the beach, I'm like, I don't want to go anywhere. And we have team in Phoenix still that handles clients there for us. So that's allowed us to slow down on travel.
Up until we moved to Florida in 23, we traveled all the time.
Yeah.
So
yeah, cool. Well, I think today's discussion is going to be extremely educational for all the listeners, and also I have a feeling, based on what I gather where this conversation is going to go, I have a feeling that I might have an additional tip for you as we get through this conversation. So I'm really excited about this. Eric and Jon, thank you so much for joining me and for being willing to share what's working well, what's not working well in your workflows, in your business. And let's dive into this. The first thing that is going well in your business that you're really proud of, that's been very successful, can you share what that is?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Scott, thanks a ton for having us. Really honored to be here and share any helpful information that we can with the audience. But yeah, the first part of our workflow that's been going really well for us is our pre-production and planning process. And so as brand photographers, we feel like we've got a really unique job to do in that we're not just defined by our style or the type of story we want to tell. We're actually having to think in some different shoes. We're having to think of our client's ideal client. Like, we're having to think one step out. Normally as photographers, we're thinking of our own ideal client. We have to think of our ideal client's ideal client. And what that means is we have to really understand their brand message and understand the unique story that they have to tell with their brand so that they can attract their ideal client. And that's really hard to do when, it's not my business. It's not a brand identity that I've developed. It's not a color scheme that I've developed. It's not a unique story that I've built. It's theirs. And so one of the things we learned really early on as brand photographers was, in order to be successful, it really required us to plan and prepare well. As a matter of fact, one of the things we say is we feel like a successful brand photo shoot is 50% planning and preparation and 50% execution, which is a lot that we wait on the planning and preparation side, right? So we really believe, we actually promise our clients, we'll never just show up with a camera and shoot like you could in some other areas of photography, maybe family photos, things of that nature, where you could just show up and start taking photos. We really have to put an emphasis on the planning and preparation side of things in order to serve them well and be on brand with their story. And so one of the things we created to help us with that through, and by the way, created through multiple failures, multiple flat on our face moments where we left photo shoots. We left so many photo shoots going oh, wow, we missed this big time. And we really started to understand the fact that as brand photographers, it's kind of our job to act as a bit of a marketing consulting agency on the planning and preparation side, so that we could build a pre-production plan that would help serve them. Because many business owners, while they know their brand, they don't necessarily know what it takes to plan a successful photo shoot.
Yep.
Yeah. So there's a couple of things I want to address here. One is, first, for those listening who don't know Erica and Jon and their work, first of all, you make sure you check out their site, which we'll share that as we get through this, as well as it'll be in the show notes. You're not doing just personal brand photography. You are legitimately doing the products, and if it is a person, it's also the product that they make, or if it's a chef, it's also the food that they cook, or could literally be a product from a major brand that's internationally known or whatever, right? You're doing brand in general work, right?
Yes.
So it's quite different than just your personal brand photographer, because it's a whole nother level, which is a good reason why when you say it's not just about your client, it's about your client's client. That is why, because it's literally being used to sell to their customer. Yeah. So there's a lot. And just to relate a little bit to what I do, I've shifted during the pandemic. I shifted from photographing families and headshots and you name it to surprise proposals. That is all I photograph now. And at the same time, I have to think about not necessarily what the couple's going to want to share, which I do, but more the relating to the planning side. I am mostly planning.
Yeah.
My photography job is so minute compared to how much planning I'm doing with the client. So I totally relate to, I would even say it's probably 80% planning for me and 20% photography compared to yours, which is 50 planning, 50 execution, right?
Yeah.
So I totally relate. Planning is so essential, but especially more when it's related to your clients making money.
Right.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So that's got to be a lot of fun to sort of play this marketing role for your clients. They probably, I would assume, just putting myself in the mindset of the potential client, I would assume that getting this sort of extra bonus marketing voice is a huge value add. What's the type of feedback you hear typically when it comes to that?
Oh, for sure. Well, I think that oftentimes we'll have, especially if they're smaller brands, new brands, or personal brands, and they don't have a very well-defined and established brand identity, we find that a lot of the questions we ask them to start our process of planning, which we call it the plan, style, create process, a lot of the questions we ask to start that process off get them thinking in a way that they haven't thought about their brand before. So especially for, like I said, smaller, new, or personal brand businesses, we're challenging them to think about their brand in a way that might be a little bit foreign to them and is a little bit of a brain exercise. But I think the value that they get out of that beyond just how it helps us serve them is exponential, because now they've got more clarity on their brand, and they can, that can trickle down into so many different aspects of their marketing. Right. When it comes to larger scale brands that are more established, that's a totally different animal, because oftentimes marketing agencies or those brand marketing reps, they'll have a full brand brief, right? And it's like, it's so in depth. We've gotten some that are like close to 100 pages long of brand specifics, with how images are used and how their logo should appear and all sorts of things.
How towels can be folded within the photos that we're creating. So it's like, it can get so specific when you're working with so many different brands. But I think when it comes down to like what you said, what is the feedback people say? Honestly, it's so positive, and it ends more so with, I don't know what the investment is, but I have to work with you. Like, I have to partner with you, because now I understand that, like, you're not just going to show up and take pictures and call it good. Like, you're diving in deep and helping me communicate my story that's behind my brand. And it really is invaluable to people.
And I think it's been really a unique experience for us, even when we've worked with some very well-established brands. Specifically, we worked with Soft Scrub, like the cleaning company, and Snuggle. Erica always loved the Snuggle Bear growing up. I didn't even know the Snuggle Bear existed, but we got to snuggle with the Snuggle Bear, which was cool.
Yeah, it's a real thing. And he's like, I never grew up seeing that. I'm like, if you ever saw a Snuggle commercial, you saw the Snuggle Bear.
When we worked with that company, though, even to see that a well-established marketing agency that was working with this large global company still had room for us to speak ideas and feedback into their plan and improve it. And so I think even to get that type of feedback from a really well-established client, that specifically, I remember Kathleen, one of our points of contact for that shoot, she was like, we came in with a plan, but they elevated this plan. They helped recommend locations. They helped us with prop styling. They helped us in so many different aspects to bring this thing together. And so I think it's been really neat to see that provide value across the board, whether it's a smaller business or someone more established.
So let me ask you this. You brought up like how you fold a towel, just as an example, right? I'm sure there's a billion examples like that, but how often would it come up where you disagree with their recommendation of how to fold a towel, and then you share your thought on the better way to fold a towel? Is there an argument back and forth, and who wins that argument typically?
The funny part is the towel thing. I was like, oh my gosh, you're so right. Like, it's the rounded part where it's not the lines of like, if I'm making sense, that they wanted facing the camera. And I was like, duh. But for me, we were like logo centered. We were like, making sure there wasn't a glare and like the whole entire logo was showing. So honestly, we welcome a lot of feedback when it comes to the specific things like that, because it's our job to create what's going to best represent their brand versus what I might have just quickly put together or.
Yeah, I think when it.
But have you ever been in a situation with all of your clients where you know that you're right and they're wrong, but you have to somehow nicely argue that?
For sure. So I think when it comes to brand knowledge and things that are important to the brand. So in the example of the towel fold, this was like something that was somehow, I think what was communicated to us is it was like a pet peeve of one of their higher up executives at this huge global company. But some of the things that they shared with us on that shoot too, we would have never known. Like, we're in a kitchen scene and there's a hand soap in the background, and it's like a totally different brand. And it's soft in the background the way we took the photo, because our photo was prominent on the project we were shooting. But they said, oh, that brand of soap is from a different manufacturer, and our parent company actually has a soap like this. So it's got to, so like, if I wouldn't, there's no way I could have possibly known that. So that feedback was incredibly helpful. I think if there's ever anything where there's friction, it maybe is more on the less on the brand knowledge side and more on the camera or technical side with, hey, I want this like this, or I want this photo here, or this is the best location for this shot. And I think in those situations, we usually try, our philosophy around any friction with a client is say no as little as possible and try instead to say, yes, we can do that. And then let me show you this too. Right. And so yes, but I'd rather say yes, but rather than no. And so often it reminds me of like our wedding photography days too. Somebody would want a picture in front of a water fountain in broad sun with terrible light in raccoon eyes. And we'd be like, okay, cool. We'll take that shot. Now let's come over here to this spot that you're not going to think is going to look good, but I know is really going to photograph well. So we'll take that approach with disagreements with clients in some of those issues.
Yeah, I can imagine things like the client saying, well, you know what? These towels will look better from more of like this angle top down. But then you'll reply saying, yes, but I have this suggestion instead of for an angle that, I could totally see that being a thing. One thing before I forget, I like to ask when I talk to couples, how does your work split between the two of you? Are you both shooting? Or is one of you more the creative, one of you more in the business, one of you more of like, let me talk to the client versus let me not talk to the client? Like, how's that dynamic between the two of you?
Yeah. So in everyday business, one of the reasons I joined Erica, so she already had a photography business when I started shooting with her. And one of the reasons I joined her in that is she was like, I love taking photos. I hate business. So that definitely falls into my bucket. Client consultations, all of that falls into my bucket. The creative side is Erica's strong suit and where she really
And
shines.
I would say like, I'm the dreamer. Like I have the idea and I'm like, to execute on this, I feel like I would rather just get back in bed. So if I can have someone to help me execute, like connect the dots, that's Jon. Like he's the one who's like, I know how to make that happen. I'm like, great, because this is the thought I have. So that's how it works on the business side. But on the shoot day,
on photo shoot day, I think it's a split.
Yeah.
And it really depends on the shoot. So if it's lighting heavy, if it's very technical, typically I like that challenge and I'll step up and lead shoot that. And Erica will be paying attention to details, socializing with the client, whatever's needed.
Styling, jumping in to do the styling, and then he's taking the shot.
If it's more personal brand or personality focused, Erica usually takes the lead. I mean, she's got such a brighter smile than me.
Well, and Jon, he's again, it's like to tell somebody no, like don't do that. Like, you got to smoothly take them in and out of a pose. And so if we can just read the client and we know that it's going to be a better thing because I can kind of predict, when you know someone's personality, like how is this going to go? And I can work with them real easily and smoothly, where Jon just...
It reminds me of a shoot. So I like to say that I struggle with social cues. And so it reminds me of a shoot that I walked into, usually on shoot day, especially if it's a personal brand. I come in and I'm like, what's up? It's time to party. Let's go. I try and set the energy really high so people feel comfortable. And my goal is if they look at me as like, wow, Jon's a little bit of a goofball, hopefully that lets them feel free to like open up throughout the shoot and follow our instructions, do some things they might not be comfortable with. And I will never forget, we walked into the shoot. It was with a very elevated personal brand. And I walked in that way, and Erica looked at me like, stop, no more. Don't let me handle this. Because she had already gotten a read on the client that like, she was not about that. It was very sophisticated, very, I don't know. I don't even know the word for it.
Yeah, it was a different feel, and that's okay. Like, again, we can do the fun and the pep and the hype. We can also go as slow as you need to go so that you don't feel rushed and you don't feel stressed. And that was way more of the mode. And I feel like I can pick up on that stuff really easily. So we just divide and conquer based on our own individual strengths and what we can tell the shoot is going to require. And a lot of times, I'll pop the camera in Jon's hand and I'm like, hey, we got lots of curls and I got to work with hair. I need to make sure that like, jackets are in order. And I just see those things like it's a blessing and a curse, but I can't see a situation and miss like the tiny details that might be out of place. And so we'll, have me in that role a lot while John's doing the camera or the
I think what's
photo
really
taking.
awesome is like, Scott, I'm sure you've had situations where creatively things just aren't flowing well and it's like a struggle and you really have to like just keep like part of you wants to just disengage and be like, I don't know what to do here. But the part of you that understands you can't do that just fights to stay in the game and try and work through that problem. I think one of the things I really appreciate is when either one of us gets stuck, we've got each other. Like if I'm trying to take a shot and it's just not coming together, I'm just like, here, you try. Because I'm sure you're going to have just a fresh perspective and a different take on this. And that always usually works out pretty well.
And there's times that I have it, and there's times where I'm like, this situation's just not working. I think what we need to do is just get a fresh start. And so it's like we can really just read each other in that way, which I think is beneficial and should be the case with any second shooter you go on, is just to be able to communicate. And I think with what we do, that really allows us to communicate openly, where it doesn't have to be an emotional moment where we're like, stop, everybody freeze. This is terrible. We need to move on. We can have a very much more production way of going about it, where it just allows us to pivot in real time when we need to.
Yeah. It's nice that you guys have that. You have each other and you know what each of your strengths and weaknesses are, and you can delegate as needed and trade off when needed and step up or step down as needed and whatnot. So it's really good. That's really good that you have that.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask something else before we moved on to the next one, and I totally forgot what it is. So we're just going to move into the next one, and maybe it'll come back to me. That'd be nice.
Okay.
Love it.
So there was another thing that you mentioned to me before recording that was working well in your workflows. Can you share what that was?
Yeah. So the other thing that we feel is really well refined in our business and it's been really cool to see this scale and be replicable across our business as our business has grown and we've brought on team members as well, is our pricing model. And so with what we do with brands, it's really, really unique because one of the things we tell our students all the time too is like collection pricing or package pricing that works in the wedding industry or with family photos and things of that nature. It really doesn't work well with brands unless you're niching to work with the same type of brand over and over again. You have no interest in going outside of that. For example, if you want to work with social media influencers, that's all you want to do, cool, package pricing might work for you. But if you want to take an approach more like we do, where, our niche, if you will, we just say it's telling a brand's image story, which every brand has a story to tell. So that opens us a pretty wide net. We like the challenge of that. If we're going to do that, then we need to have pricing that's adaptable to each type of client and the unique needs that they have.
Yeah.
And so again, lesson learned through trial and error and complete failure. We used to try to develop collection pricing that would be a one size fits all for the brand that was going to work with us. And we'd think we finally had it developed, and then we'd get an inquiry and realize it fit none of our packages. And it kind of just gave us the awareness one day that we would have to custom quote every single project that we did for brands. And if anybody listening to us right now say that feels absolute like fear, complete chaos and shock and awe inside of their soul, like we did too. So we're like, we've got to figure out a way to tailor pricing in a custom way to these brands, but we can't be going back to the drawing board every single time we get an inquiry. That's just not going to be scalable. That's not going to work.
You're right. And I think that's the important thing to note is we're saying this from a point of some scars on that side of our business. Like there was a time where we were getting proposals and it was like, well, this number sounds good. Like, I'm sure they would pay us this. Or it was like, no, this brand has some like beef to it. Like, this is going to really be the booster. We can charge higher. So it's like we went through a time where
it was based on gut.
It was painful. Like, it wasn't smooth. We didn't have the confidence in what we were doing. And it was like, when we landed the job, it was like, well, I don't know. Did we do that right? Did we miss something?
Did we undersell ourselves? Did we oversell ourselves? How did we handle this? And so one of the things we did is we developed a pricing model that we call the 4 building block pricing system that helps us custom quote every single inquiry that we get. And one of the things we say about it is it helps us custom quote 99% of brand photography projects in 5 minutes or less, which is a huge thing to say, but it's true. I mean, it's what we use day in and day out in our business to meet brands where they are and give them a custom proposal.
And what is this, like an app you made? Is it a spreadsheet that you put together that allows you to reuse it over and over again? Is it like how how does this live within your business that you it is
Yeah.
How do you put now, of course, like I don't know if you're selling this to education clients. I don't know what you've got, but please share whatever.
Yeah, absolutely.
Whatever you can
happy
share.
to share about it. Happy to share about it.
Yeah.
So one of the things that is unique about brand photography too is when you are paid as a photographer to go capture wedding day images or family images, surprise proposal images, you're being paid to show up there with your camera, take the photos, and deliver the photos. And some people do in-person sales on the back end of that, which is an added layer. But otherwise, it's kind of an all-in-one cost. When we think of the variables that exist, though, with brands, there's so many variables. There's
Commercial
the cost
use.
There's the cost for me to show up and actually do the creative side of things. There's also, to the point you just brought up, how are the photos going to be used and what's the marketing value of that photo and how do we capture that through licensing? There's pre-production costs based on like, are we securing locations and paying those? Are we doing any other sort of planning that's going to require upfront costs? Are there any other vendors involved in this shoot coming together? To as big as like, does a set need to be built? What does that look like? Do custom pieces of equipment need to be rented or secured for the photo shoot? And then just additional expenses that we've got. So we break that down into 4 buckets in our 4 building block pricing system that we teach students how to develop the rates within each of those 4 buckets. So the 4 buckets are, number 1, your creative rate. So your rate to show up and just execute as a photographer. What is your rate to show up and handle the shoot? And typically we break that down by an hourly, half day, or full day cost. So bucket number 1 is creative rate. Number 2 is value add, what's the word? Thank you. Value add services. So anything that we would offer above and beyond just us showing up to execute on the photo shoot that we would monetize and bill our client for. So some of that is our pre-production process that we talked about earlier, plan, style, create process. Some of that, like I mentioned, would be, are we going to do additional things like a wardrobe consultation, or are there any additional meetings involved that would be compensated for? Any additional planning elements that we're bringing to the table?
Well, like we don't do video, but we do partner with videographers. So it's like, are we going to provide video through who we're partnering with? Again, that's like additional value that we're providing in the form of a service that wouldn't be there otherwise.
So we've got those different items that we typically offer our clients that are built into that bucket with markup on them that we would use in our pricing system. The third is image licensing, and that's a huge variable, and it's actually where a huge opportunity is in this space, because one of the things I like to unpack for people is like, think of it as if I took a picture of a sneaker for my Uncle Bill's sneaker startup that he's doing out of his garage. He's making sneakers. He's a little cobbler. He's making sneakers. If I took pictures of that shoe for him to launch this sneaker on social media, and then if I went into a studio with Nike and I'm in the studio for 2 days with all these, brand reps and shoe artists and all these different people in the room with the singular goal of creating like 5 final photos that they would use globally to launch this sneaker. At the end of the day, like there's not a huge difference in my skill set as a photographer, right? I'm still just showing up and I'm still the same person. I'm still using the same creative skills. So how do I account for the difference in value? Because we'd all agree there's a difference in value for Uncle Bill's shoe versus
It's the scale.
Nike.
Nike's reach versus your uncle's reach.
Right.
Or whoever he was.
How do we account for that? That's where image licensing comes in. That's how we get paid for the value of the asset that we're creating that in turn equals, exponentially more value to that company. So that's the image licensing bucket. And then the final one are additional expenses. And those are expenses that, again, in our own business journey, I'll never forget the time we showed up to shoot the White Sox for the first time, the Chicago White Sox. We showed up to shoot them and we had bought seamless paper backdrops. We rented a generator. We rented all sorts of studio lighting equipment, rolled in there. We ate all of those costs. And then we realized as we progressed through our career that, wow, those were all kind of cost of doing business for the client. So B2B is a little bit different. Business to business is a little bit different. So those are the 4 building blocks: creative rate, value add services, image licensing, and additional expenses. And what we teach our students to do is pre-build their pricing through our system. And we help them get to those exact numbers, but pre-build those prices in those buckets so that then when a client comes in, you go, how long is this shoot going to be? How long do I think I need to serve them? Cool. I grab that out of the bucket number 1. What different services they're going to need? I grab those values out of bucket number 2, and so forth, so that you can build a proposal really quickly because you've already established what those rates are.
Hopefully you get a ton of Nikes in Chicago. White Sox. Okay, so I remember the question I wanted to ask you, and you actually mentioned it throughout answering that last question, which is great. I was actually going to ask you, what do you typically do with the sets? Is it mostly you have to build a set? Are you outsourcing it to a contractor to build a set? Are you renting spaces, finding studios? Like, what does it like typically look like for your business?
I can't think of a time we took on full-on building a set.
We've never built a full set. We have built custom. We have been out in the garage with tools, building custom miniature sets,
custom props and custom things to like enhance the story of the photos that we were telling.
I remember when we worked with the restaurant, though, we made all of our own backdrops, and we built these wooden. We tiled surfaces for flat lays. We stuccoed surfaces for flat lays. We did concrete stuff, all sorts of stuff to make these backdrops. But typically, it comes down to renting venues for us or renting studio spaces. And that's part of our planning process. It's one of the things actually that we give our clients as a complimentary service is location sourcing, because we found very early on that we can change a lot of things on photo shoot day. One thing we can't change once we're there is the location. So we want to make sure that's really dialed. And so we source locations. We've actually got a location guide that we built out for our business, and all the locations we've ever shot in, we build those out in like a magazine format so that we can deliver our clients a custom location guide. And we take basically this master list of all these locations we've shot at with pictures and what we like about the space and the rates and everything else. We remove the things that don't apply, and we send them a custom location guide so that they can see, hey, these are spaces that we know, that we trust, that are on brand for you. And that's been really successful
curated for your brand, for your products, et cetera. So you rent, let's say you rent a studio, you rent a commercial kitchen for a job, right? Are you ever using things like V-Flat now makes lay flat bottoms and backgrounds and things? Are you using stuff like that mixed in with the natural environment, or is it mostly natural environment lit and styled the way that you want?
Yeah, it's a mix.
I was gonna say it's a solid mix of both. I mean, we've got seamless backdrop paper, that we'll buy individually for clients to match the color of their brands. And so that's one of those, again, one-off things. I mean, we've got a stash of some crazy colors because we had brands who wanted the bright and the bold and the super vibrant kind of colors. So that's unique to their brand.
In a kitchen space, though, like thinking to one of the restaurants that we worked with, we had all sorts of ideas around what the background would be for these photos, but then we're in the restaurant and we're like, you guys have these gorgeous natural wood tone tables. Let's use these. Like we don't need all this other stuff. Let's use these and incorporate other elements like, like linen towels and raw ingredients and things of that nature to spice up the background of these photos. But what if we create the consistency across the things that you've already got here too? So we always come equipped with plenty of options for backgrounds, and usually again in the planning process those things are kind of talked about and decided on, but then we'll also use the things that are there in the environment too, to our advantage if we can. Cool.
This is I love learning about this, the way that it's not too often when I get to speak to photographers that aren't solely focused on people, right? That you've got products mixed in with the people that you photograph. So it's really nice to learn about these different aspects that you don't get to talk about too much. So I love this.
Yeah. Awesome.
So the last thing that we want to talk about is something in your workflow that you're struggling with, that you're working on improving. Do you want to share what that is?
Yeah, I think one of the things, and I think a lot of listeners will probably resonate, is content creation. In terms of content that's going to speak to our ideal client, and because we do educate in this space too, photographers who want to get into brand photography, build a similar business to what we've built. It's creating content, and I think it's because there are so many places for our content to go. There are so many things you could devote time to, and sometimes it's really hard. Like you could do all the things, and you could create content pieces for every platform. You could be everywhere all at once. But it gets really challenging then to measure the return on investment on those efforts. Sometimes even as complex as we've gotten of working with different software that help us see where those channels are coming from, sometimes it's still a big question mark. And so I think one of the things we realized, I was actually just talking with somebody about this a few days ago, and it makes me laugh. But I think actually any listeners can go check me on this. If you go to our website, Erica and Jon, no H in John, just Jon, ERICA and Jon.com. If you go there and look at the bottom of our social links, I'm pretty sure we might have a Pinterest icon down there that goes to absolutely nothing because 4 years ago we intended to get on Pinterest, and
it's not there anymore.
It's not there anymore. Okay.
Thank
We're
goodness.
still on we're still not on Pinterest. And the reason why is we looked at okay.
I love that he checked you.
Yeah, thank you. We could try to be everywhere and burn ourselves out and potentially talk to no one, or we can just look at one of my favorite quotes is from Craig Rochelle. He says, successful people do consistently what others do occasionally. And I think there's just such a truth in that in all aspects of life, of like the tiny steps taken on a consistent basis lead to more growth over time than just occasional acts of like a big effort. And so one of the things we looked at was, where can we commit to showing up on a regular basis that doesn't feel like it's going to burn us out, that we can at least just commit to, this is where we are for now. If we can ever grow beyond that, great. But if not, what are the places we know we can consistently show up to? But content's kind of your thing. So do you want to talk about that?
Content's kind of my thing. And people will like say like, you do so good. I'm like, really? You want to come behind the scenes and see how that content was pumped out? Because it was on a whim when I had the thought, and like, I have so many good intentions, truly, of doing the whole, I'm going to prep for a month of content in advance. But I maybe have done that like, I don't know, less than 10 times over the course of our business. Have I been successful sitting down, planning it out, knowing what photo was going to go with what, or knowing what kind of nowadays reel I was going to make with, what it was going to be? And I think that's just because it's just like, again, like Jon was saying, it's so important, but at the same time, am I moving my business further along by doing this or by doing something different? And so I think that's the part that constantly becomes a pain point, because we're always like, well, geez, is it worth taking the time to do this right now, or is it not? Yeah. So truly, I mean, we talk with people about it all the time, but it's like, yeah, it's an ongoing, not yet perfectly solved issue that we face in our business.
We have a goal of what we want to get to, Scott, that I honestly wrote down on a napkin 4 years ago now, that we still have not gotten there.
It was in 2020. I think.
That's why
you're talking like a revenue goal, or you mean like a content goal?
A content
production
workflow goal that we still haven't gotten to yet. And so for full transparency, right now the things we've committed to are our Instagram, our Facebook group, and our blog
and
email. And I just posted our blog that was supposed to go up at 9:00 this morning. I posted it at 8:53 this morning. Like that's not a great workflow, right? So one of the things that we want to work towards is creating content in the same format we're creating content with you right now on this podcast, with a podcast, with a video element that we can then take and we can chop all of those bits up and use those across so many different platforms. It's actually getting there and getting it all set up and the structure of it set up and the time and planning it all out that gets to feel really difficult, because you've got, at the same time, you have what's currently set up that obviously shows me posting a blog 7 minutes before it's supposed to go live. That doesn't leave a whole lot of margin for setting up
Not the end of the world, by the way.
Yeah.
If you're
not the end of the world. Yeah, not the end of the world, but still it doesn't leave a lot of margin for us to set up something brand new that's unknown, that needs to be figured out. And obviously it's not that's not a revolutionary content model. A lot of people do that. But yeah, full transparency, that's a spot that we struggle with. And I think the reason why it's such a pain point for us personally is like, we know the transformation we've been able to see in our business through the things we've learned. We obviously want to share that with others, and for businesses that want our services, we want to show them what we're able to do. And so we feel like there's an importance, and it's even beyond just teaching photographers how to be great brand photographers. Like when I think of, if we're able to help someone increase revenue in their business as a brand photographer, like it's more, that sounds cool, but it's way beyond that. Like that trickles down. Maybe that helps relieve stress inside of a home. Maybe that allows a parent to have more time with their child. Maybe that alleviates friction in a marriage. Like there's so many things that trickles down to that are non-tangible, I can't see, that I know are taking place behind the scenes. And so when we recognize that the way to get our message out there is through content, to show people what there is and make them aware of what's available, and it feels like such a bottleneck for us to break through and get to the place we want to be, it creates a lot of friction, I think, for us on a regular basis.
It's interesting that you brought up that you've been wanting to do a podcast. I was actually going to suggest that. So I guess my next question is, based on your last comment, is the podcast that you want to do for your education side of your business or for the brand photography side of your business?
I'd say both, and with more of a heavy weight towards photographers and the education side. But I think the idea we've had for a podcast is, we've been able to work with some really cool people over the course of our careers that are all business owners or high up decision makers in businesses in their own right that have wisdom to share. And we've thought it would be so cool to bring different voices of people, clients that we've worked with. So in that aspect, it's for our photography clients because past clients get an opportunity to share. Maybe people who need services like that go, oh, wow, I have the same kind of business. I'd love to work with Eric and Jon's company. But also from the education standpoint, to show people what's possible and teach business advice and things like that through the podcast.
Well, and
I love this idea. And I could talk about this with you for days. So anyways, Eric, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, I didn't mean to cut you off. Sounds like we might need to talk to you about it for days. But I think the part of speaking to the photographers that's so important is, like I kind of mentioned earlier, it's like we don't ever sit where we're at in our business without remembering like the hard things that we had to go through to get to where we can sit and like tell people what's possible, because we went through a lot of years of like, we're just done. We're just going to be completely done. Like, this will be so much easier. Jon's really cushy job at the, empire where he worked before sounds a whole lot better. So I think those things, because it's just what's so real. And I think a lot of people can relate to those feelings. And so, yes, we have each other. And I think I'm so grateful we didn't have to have those seasons alone. But I know there's a lot of photographers who don't have a business partner or even a second shooter or even a team member. And so it's like for them to know, like, you're not alone. It's okay. It's okay. Like, you're not the only one. It's like that would be the really cool part I see for that side of who we'd be speaking to.
Yeah. When we're done recording, we're going to talk a little bit more about this. But this is great. I think it is a struggle for anybody, whether you have a partner or not in your business, to do the content side of things. I also despise social media, but we have no choice these days, right? It's a big part of marketing. So to me, I treat social media as, let me get them to my email list. To then utilize that, which I know is effective. So with that said, I always recommend, whenever I'm talking to photographers that have a very successful business, right, that sure, you could do it yourself, but you could also hire somebody, right, even if it's somebody hungry straight out of college, to do some of this. They may not necessarily be getting their hands on the camera, during your sessions, but they could be doing BTS and they could be coming up with content ideas for you while you're on the job, and they could also be your assistant carrying bags, etc. Right? These people are hungry, right? They want to get into the business fast, and you also have you're in a genre of photography that is not very popular, right? Compared to weddings or families, right? Things like that. So if you find people from a college, you're going to find people that are really interested in what you're doing, that would absorb like crazy. So, you're going to help yourself, but you're also going to help somebody that could, in 5-10 years, could be where you are, which would be amazing to have played a role like that, right? So that's my thought on that. Besides from the podcast, just content in general is utilize college students that are hungry.
I mean, it's so true. And I think it's one of those things where it's like your own limiting belief, like, it's got to be me. It has to be me. It has to be my creative idea. It has to be that. And so in full transparency, there's some of those things that we've had to break down, saying like, okay, I can actually outsource my editing. Like, what? I never thought I would be able to say that. Like, truly, day one, I was like, yeah, right. And coming from somebody who likes to be the master of control, it's like, yeah, right. I'll never be able to do that. So there is so much truth to what you said. And I think it's just applying it to a different place of our business. It's like, it didn't feel easy when we started outsourcing X, Y, and Z in the first place, but then it became like the most beautiful thing to say, I'm passing this off to you. And I know there's a lot of truth in that being the same with content creation. So
100%.
Thanks for that nudge.
Of course. Erica and Jon, this has been a fantastic conversation. I know I've you've opened my eyes to some things that I never thought about before. So it's really fun to be able to learn some new things when I have these conversations. You did mention where everybody can find you before, but if you can say it one more time, where everybody can find you, connect with you, and of course, see your incredible brand photography.
Well, thanks. Yeah, you can find us at ericaandjon.com. So it's ERICA, the word and, Jon, JON.com. Also on Instagram at Erica and Jon. And for all the listeners, if there's anybody listening that's interested in brand photography, as we've mentioned a couple times, we're educators in that space. We've got courses and classes, but we also have free resources around that that we're happy to make available. So if anybody wants, we've got a few resources like our personal brand shot list, which helps with the planning side, especially if you're working with a personal brand. We also have a free resource called 5 Pricing Mistakes that helps kind of evaluate where you're at with pricing in your brand photography business and avoid some of those things that we stumbled down. And we have a free class too on how to break into brand photography. So if anybody listening is interested in learning how do I add brand photography to what I offer, maybe you're a wedding photographer or you work with families and you recognize, hey, there's an opportunity here to serve brands too. We've got a free class that can help with that too. All of those can be found at ericaandjon.com/links, and you'll see all those resources available there.
Yep, and I'll have this also in the show notes so everybody can just do a quick click on their phones or wherever you're listening and access all that. So thank you again for joining me. This has been an incredible conversation.
Thanks for having
Thank you,
us.
Scott.
You have been listening to the Workflows Photography Podcast. To hear more from Workflows, to learn more about our guest, and for an exclusive offer for Workflows listeners, please go to workflowspodcast.com. And be sure to subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Thank you for tuning in. Until next time.